All right, good morning. March 5th, down here at the Agro Liquid Fertilizer facility for the 2019 Michigan Forage and Grazing Conference. Let me show you the outside of this place. If you guys never seen this place, it's quite impressive that this Agro Liquid facility. They have a lot of community events here. It's like a museum in there. It's quite a setup they did. I'll turn the camera around here to show you. So Agro Liquid has a little museum here set up. I never even actually went through this museum before, but that's pretty impressive. Could do a whole video just on the Agro Liquid Museum, I guess. But you know, I'm up here for the Forage Conference. So, wow, look at this, 1967 John Deere 2020. This must be an orchard tractor. Sprayer. Yeah, pretty impressive facility. So, at any rate, so I'm going to go ahead and get to the conference. I guess they got like a model here. You can get in there and do something, I guess.
Quality, but also ends up being about that 30 days or so of regrowth. In applying that to alfalfa grass mixtures, with the idea that if you want a bit of a boost, one of the biggest downsides is how do you keep a perfect 20 to 30% grass quality, limited weed control. Right now, the reduced lignin alfalfa, that type that is the genetically Michigan, it's just that little bit of a yield hit here.
And you can see where our farm is at by Harrisville, just south of the 45th latitude. And so we're like halfway, I guess. Take as much bias out as I could, so this is talk about the production side of it as well. Byron seeds and Cisco seeds.
My name's Dick Divobis, and we run most people would look at us and say it's a hobby farm. And one of the last articles that year per year, including Phil and Cable and some other people, the reason there's the warm season grasses without damaging your cool season plots? No. But, you know, hope springs eternal. It might work in the following management scenario. You could incorporate it into your paddock renovation. Market does too, because I market my meat retail.
That we are able to look at how the material is actually going to perform in real life. Most likely everything else went down too, all right? Because if you have a horrendous rainstorm, it's a copy of a handout out on a table back there that summarized some of the data from this. Going to take your yield hit. You're just not going to get very much, and sometimes no alfalfa here in Michigan to harvest in that first year. John's work has shown very clearly that alfalfa variety matters. All right, it had by far the best corn of our sites, and it was just a little bit too much for our alfalfa for planting corn. It was too rough. It was very difficult to get our alfalfa seed placement where we wanted if you don't have at least that much. All right. Now it might work for a pasture, all right, where you're sending the animals out. After we harvested the clovers in the first year, we killed them all off that fall because the red clover and anywhere from just a little bit over 80 pounds of nitrogen down to a little over 40 pounds was the range of nitrogen fixation that was being able to be used by that grass in the following year.
And the one on your right, that's orchard grass alfalfa. So that's going to be bringing in small square bales about $300. If he was feeding it, and I think his son's actually going to feed most of this to his own animals, it'd be pretty good for one time. If it gets stuck, you can push it out with this rod that goes in the bale. The material goes into this PVC pipe. The fence supply is the one that paid for this. I always get there just by putting the search engine publications. And except for things like planting days. So Greg Hallett, our economist, talked about fixed cost of hay production. The main points, the role of legumes, and depending if there's time, maybe a little bit on nutrient. Dynamic natural body composed of mineral and organic solids, gasity. There's all kind of, it'd be on that acre for 6 months, or that acre would produce 4. It talks about the amount of nutrients removed by different forage crops. Contains 12.5 pounds of nitrogen, 3.4 pounds of phosphorus, nearly the potassium back on the field that is being removed. But a grazing animal is doing that. Research station, I don't have the actual soil test results, but around the management and plant growth. In fact, even in Kentucky, we always debate over how much warm season it is, that it can be so efficient, but a lot of it's because it doesn't have that wasteful photorespiration process. Pastures, there's the initial green up, then what's happening, there's a low leaf area, there's not much light being intercepted. It's where we planted our different varieties, like Kim was talking about the forage variety after each of the harvest intervals. So where it was cut short, you know, those plants loses about 30% of its root system a year. The winter. Get in the middle of the summer and you get into dry conditions or hot conditions, some of the roots are going to die off and fall fescue. The dotted line is red carbohydrates in the base, but you're really stressing an orchard grass plant when you take it down close. We talked about the tap-rooted legumes, like the red clover and alfalfa. Top growth, you have an initial drop of carbohydrates. From that, 30 to 40% down to even 10%. Complete the carbohydrates and never build back up. The plant gets weaker and weaker. You get those root rot, things higher grazing height. This diagram says 3 inches, but I would really go more like 3 to 4 or even 5. High cutting height or high grazing height favors plants more dependent on leaf area. Think about it. I'm always really, I mean, I'm at USDA at the University of Kentucky has found that there's isoflavones in red clover in the form of urea and not going down into the small intestine to actually help the animal grow and get the same effect. But here we're having a natural antimicrobial. That's present in other legumes as well, is in the grazing system, where you got the ingestion and then the deposition. Michael Fly was the main lead researcher in a lot of this work.
Operation, and then tell us how you use plastic and preservative and how it works and the pluses and minuses or whatever you want to call it.
If some of you were on the tour last summer, we came to my farm and we went over a few things there. But on my farm, we're doing around 2,000 acres a year in and year out. About a 30-year hay is, at least on my farm, wasn't the spec that we wanted. And then beyond that, when you just can't wait anymore, we have the ability to make baleage. Is starting off right with your hay mower. That's the most important part. But we like to let it lay longer, and we tend to rake it on the drier side than what textbook horse hay every time or a good dry hay every time. You're probably pretty disappointed.
Preservative is your best insurance that you
Yeah.
got. When you go out to bale, it's an insurance policy that you're taking out when you're putting it on.
Down on the Michigan-Ohio line, or in 127. Our family has 300 acres of alfalfa and mixed hay. Most of our market is the dairy hay. We'll use 3 in a field at the same time, and then we have a 13-foot disc barn. We use all 3x3 big square.
Some of the advantages you can see with that acid or disadvantages over the years that you've changed or fine-tuned.
I was pretty young when they started. When the propionic acid came out, it wasn't buffered. So it was very hard on the equipment, a lot of rusting out.
And they said it does not hurt the horse as long as you don't use too high levels of application. Then you're probably the borderline taste. The taste is going to be what they don't like. Pounds to 14 or 15. And the taste then becomes acidic, kind of the horse. They don't like the taste as well.
About 800 acres of alfalfa grass mixes. We do primarily all baleage. I've given up trying to put up dry super high density, super high compression baler. That's brought our plastic cost down to about $6.45. We're going to be switching mine this year, even though we're doing baleage. We want to get that alfalfa dry as quick as we can, so it's out there in the sun as little as possible. We've seen a big difference in using those type rollers. I tell the horse people I'd rather sell you hay that's not moldy than hay that is moldy. See the weather for 10 days, I still get more hay rain down than I used to. John and I are using Circle C also makes one. There's other ones out there. New disc vines this year. He took brand new rollers and some way got them done.
As long as, I mean, the second thing you need is sunshine other than conditioning, in my opinion. But You know, it's a priceless piece of your
More
puzzle.
spots in the stems yet. And
Yep.
with those rollers, I see more continuous crimping in the stems. They dry out more evenly. So that's been the main difference.
Stem open. You know, like a first cutting stem that's kind of fat, it'll split it right open to the side. The only downside to it is if it rains on it, it really sucks the joint in it. And it'll actually snap that joint, and I think that's huge. Where the rolls I had in the past and stuff, we had New Holland mowers and some Hestons over the years before that, and it would just damage it, it wouldn't actually crush it like this is back up. I mean, you're back to square one again.
Now going to spreading it out as wide as.
Whatever height we have to cut to get the crop cut off. And we're fortunate to have a couple machines, so when the hay lays down, we'll actually cut one way. He was saying earlier in his presentation, you know, the grasses and such, you want a little higher correlation to cutting height because it's still, I mean, you're still right against the ground. It's, your ground moisture in general has more to do with it.
I would prefer not to. Just because it takes more time to rake and bale.
We do for grass the first couple weeks in June. If we're shooting for a really high yield on our good fields and our high yields, the orchard grass is really thick, combination is, and we want to shoot for over 3 ton an acre, okay? Now, if you ever rake 3 ton an acre hay out with a lot of nitrogen in it, you know, the windrolls will be really big if you bring 2 tens together, and so to get uniformity for us in the horse market, because you want uniform drying, it becomes important. Some fields will say, no, I don't think we'll have to on that field, but other ones will say it's really heavy.
Grass conditioner, they just strip too many leaves. To get alfalfa crimped with an impeller, it takes all the leaves out.
From WLs to Pioneers to, it was not there, chop it, but it was terrible genetics. I could go out in the field and put ribbons on every stem on second and third cutting, and there was still a great big percentage was, and so, I mean, that takes you to different machines and different processes when your hay doesn't dry. These guys won't do that, but we'll bale up to 20% alfalfa in small bales, put it in the barn with a Holschler stacker. It turns out beautiful hay, best hay we put up probably, because you retain the leaves with the extra moisture. It's going to heat on you, and so you got to use preservative. And so it becomes really important that you know what your moisture level is.
I guess I didn't mention that we're baling 3x4x8s. That's our standard platform for baling. And the bales weigh about 1,300 pounds, and our protocol is to just put acid on them, only 10 miles an hour. You know, it doesn't have time to adjust. So we just put a set rate on no matter what, no matter the moisture of the hay, because every time we try to not put it on, it ends up biting us in front
Into the baler, you're going to be 300 feet down the field from when it tells you to kick on, and that's too far a margin error, you know, so that's the way we do it, not what on.
You asked like, well, how we test it?
Yeah, you guys are talking about moisture content.
Just say they don't want treated hay. And the hay growers in Kentucky that were using propionic acid or some of the other products have stopped doing propionic acid applicator. So it's being fed to the thoroughbred horses on the University of Kentucky farm.
400 acres of orchard, you know, October 24th, and individual wrapped, and I moved it onto alpacas, sheep, horses, and it didn't ferment because it was cool weather.
This winter in Kentucky from botulism. And often it's somebody that, you know, was putting up mature hay, not wrapping it enough, really wet.
Moisture hay, or, because I've always understood that you can only get botulism in a real wet product.
Problem, if it's silage and you're selling it to them and it's too dry to cause botulism, but the way they're feeding it, it's getting wet with this really wet winter. Really high moisture hay, you can get
Like
botulism.
butyric acid from really high moisture, which is cause for Clostridium.
For botulism, and I've heard different stories in Europe of whether they're vaccinated or not. I'm sure not all the horses are.
Simply because I don't want to ship water, okay?
We are, let's put that down here so it doesn't fall. We are at the end of the rope, so to say.